Well, Uncle Doug,
Ahoy.
as we were just talking about before we pressed record, of all the races of people in the world, the one that really is the most problematic generally is probably the Irish.
Okay.
Is that a race?
Isn't it?
I don't know.
I don't know. But, well, they're trouble.
Goodbye, Irish listener.
They're trouble.
Oh, they know. They know what they've done.
Yeah.
They're not going to go
what
away.
you did. Go back to County Cork and think about it.
I like that we've descended into ranking the races. That's always a good place to go.
That never ends well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's kind of our March Madness. we have brackets.
Listen, our Monday listeners, our dear and holy patrons, are going to catch this early. But for those listening on Wednesday, Faith and Begora, Aaron Gobra, Slancha, and all the other May the Road Rise to Meet You cliches you might want, because it's St. Paddy's Day. So, top of the morning to you. Pro tip, nobody in Ireland actually says that. Wear some green, kiss somebody right on their blarney, and always after me Lucky Charms. When there's not still a global pandemic going on, the feast of the Day of the Patron Saint of Ireland is a pretty good time here in the US of A. This tradition goes all the way back to the early 1600s, when an Irish vicar in then Spanish Florida held the first ever St. Patrick's Day parade, something that had never happened in Ireland. It didn't really catch on then, because Spaniards don't care that much about Patrick. So it wasn't until the mid-1700s that it came back. Boston led the way, holding its first march on the 17th of March. Its first March parade. That's where I'm getting messed up here. Holding its first March 17th parade in 1737. New Yorkers started doing it in 1762. 10 years later, a group of Irish soldiers serving in the English army decided to fend off their homesickness by also marching in New York. The English army thus became everyone's favorite people here, and just a few years later, the colonies threw them a very big party. Anyway, since white folks wantonly snatched this land, the U.S. has always had a lot of Irish immigrants, and they used St. Patrick's Day as a way of communing with their heritage. And what better way to commune with your heritage than to celebrate a holiday with traditions that nobody back in the homeland ever did? So look, St. Paddy's Day is a Catholic feast day in the middle of Lent. It was not supposed to be a party. Sure, they would sometimes suspend prohibitions on eating meat so as they could feast, but traditionally the pubs would close. That happened until the 1970s, and it would mainly be a solemn religious affair.
St. Patrick's Day.
No kidding.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a feast day for a saint. It's not a party. Well, fuck that. Irish folks were often treated like shit here. They were Catholics in a Protestant world. They were looked down on and largely kept out of lucrative jobs. So, St. Pat's became a time to get together and feel united, and to show their numbers to the world. It quickly went from a holy feast to the green vomit-smeared drunken shit show we all know and love today. It's a bit, it's been such a popular celebration here that it has bled over back to the old country. So if you're in Ireland mid-March now, you'll see green everywhere, even though the traditional color for St. Patrick himself was blue. And every pub will throw a crazy party just like we do here. Cities like Dublin now have multi-day bashes that involve music and activities and parades, but that's literally just them trying to live up to the expectation of tourists who used to show up dressed like idiot leprechauns, ready for colored beer and corned beef, only to find that none of that was part of the Irish tradition. They've literally changed their whole tradition to accommodate U.S. morons who want to get wasted and break their ankle trying to river dance. Everyone involved should be very proud. But who is this Patrick, this saint who stands for Ireland and everyone who vaguely associates with it? Well, let's get into that. You likely know a few things about St. Patrick already. The legends that surround him are woven into much of the celebrations that we haphazardly bumble through as we drink our way through his day. But come on, this is the How-To Heretic. If you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you likely already know that if we're talking about a saint, those things that you know about him are almost certainly bullshit.
Exactly.
So go ahead and get out your fact-check bingo cards, and we'll see later how much of our communal knowledge holds up. For an early medieval guy, we actually know quite a bit about Paddy Boy, or rather we know quite a bit about what he wanted us to believe about him, because most of our info comes from his writings. Letters to the soldiers of Coroticus, which was mostly a denunciation of the British treatment of Irish Christians. Who cares how they treated the heathen pagans? And, more helpfully, an autobiography called Confessio, which is Latin for something like declaration. We have no idea when or where he was born exactly, but it was somewhere in Great Britain, that's England, Scotland, or Wales, sometime in the 5th century. He was born into a somewhat prominent Roman family. This was toward the end of the Roman occupation of Britain, and they seemed to enjoy some status wherever they were. But while Britain was crawling with Roman Christians, Ireland was crawling with pagans. Well, maybe not crawling. The 3 centuries before had seen a pretty steep drop in Irish population. Nobody knows why, but there has been speculation that the Romans were kidnapping folks and taking them back to Britain as slaves. Not great. It's pretty much a terrible thing to do, but the Irish must have figured turnabout is fair play, because our boy Patrick's first trip to Ireland was occasioned at the age of 16 when he won a free trip across the Irish Sea as the compulsory guest / newly captured slave of a group of Irish raiders who attacked his father's villa. Strangely, Patrick didn't enjoy his time in captive slavery, though he hadn't been a very fervent believer back home, he suddenly found a compelling reason to pray to God. In Confessio, he says he would pray 20 times per day and another 20 at night, which, when your whole life is compelled labor, I suppose muttering prayers about wishing your life was better is as good an occupation as any. 6 years, our boy Pat worked as a herdsman and prayed, and then, according to him, one night he heard a voice in a dream tell him to get out of there, which he didn't hear that voice every night?
I know, right?
Anyway, the voice said that there was a ship that could take him back to wherever the fuck he was from. No word on whether that voice mentioned that the ship was 200 miles away, but it was. So Pat snuck out and wandered eastward for a very long time until he finally found a port and talked his way onto a boat. After that, it was easy, just a short boat ride across the sea, another very long journey on foot, near starvation, another brief stint in captivity, and then boom, he was home. Home safe, he decided to pursue work with his newfound sense of religious fervor. After all, who wouldn't be grateful to a God who heard him begging for help, and after only 6 agonizing years of constant pleading, and then saved him by putting him through months of terrifying venturing alone in the woods with cutthroats and highwaymen at every turn, when that same God could have just prevented him from having been captured in the first place.
Right.
Anyway, he took up the priesthood. Now, maybe it was as he claimed, that he dreamed that the people of Ireland called to him to come back and convert them to Jesus, and so he followed his calling. Or maybe the higher-ups in the church were looking for people to send as missionaries to that terrifying island, and suddenly they had a guy who spent 6 years learning the language, so they just shrugged their shoulders and told him he had to go. Whatever the case, off he went, back to the Emerald Isle. Now, the legend of St. Patrick says that he converted Ireland to Christianity. That is, of course, stupid. There were over 1 million people scattered all over that very large island, and he was only one guy. Also, there were already Christians there. Before Patrick, Pope Celestine I, or Celestine Prophecy I, if you prefer the full name.
I recommend you don't.
Right? had sent a guy named Palladius to be Bishop of Ireland. No word on what Palladius had done to warrant this punishment, which it almost certainly would have been for a Roman bishop. But you don't send a bishop if there aren't any Christians. The fact is that Ireland didn't really become Christian for at least a century after Patrick, like as a full thing. So what did Patrick actually do that was so noteworthy? Well, it seems that he was particularly adept at making friends with the kings of Ireland. At that point, Ireland was separated into lots of tiny little kingdoms, or maybe we should call them clan chieftains or sultanates. Anyway, every little area had its own bigwigs, and our boy Patrick became a master starfucker. I mean, this guy could talk his way into all the good parties. So, while he didn't convert thousands or likely even hundreds to Christianity, he got on the good side of lots of important people. He made it okay. So when he converted the king's nephew or that king's daughter, they didn't balk. Interestingly, that innovation may well have cleared the way for the Christianizing of the island over the next 100 years. So maybe Patrick was instrumental in that. Poor Irish bastards.
Less of a missionary and more of a salesman.
Well, what is a missionary if
True.
not a salesperson?
True.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, these poor Irish people had a perfectly good heathenism going, but one sneaky guy starts to make Jesus look hip and non-threatening, and you're ruined for thousands of years. So there you go. So that's about as much history as we actually know about the guy. But wait, you say, we know more than that about him. Ah, yes, we still have to get to snakes and shamrocks, don't we?
That's right.
I'm tired of these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking Ireland.
That's right. So, yeah, indeed, the legends abound about our dear Patrick. So, yes, he is said to have driven all the snakes from the island. That would be a pretty cool miracle, considering how non-responsive most snakes are to even the most insistent human coaxing. And yet it is true that Ireland has no snakes. It is, of course, also true that there's no evidence that Ireland ever had snakes. They don't seem to have ever been on the island. There's nothing in the fossil record or anything like that. So, where does this legend come from? Well, most scholars think that it was a metaphor. It was in the fine Christian tradition, everybody that wasn't Christian was considered evil, and since snakes and serpents are a stand-in for the concept of evil throughout the Bible, it's likely that this was a legend. That this legend was actually a reference to Patrick clearing out all of those nasty pagans, which he also didn't do, but he got credit for anyway. Then there's the legend of the Shamrock. It's said that Patrick used the three-leafed plant to illustrate how to think of the Holy Trinity. 3 separate entities, but one whole. Now, if you're like me, this image doesn't help in conceptualizing the Trinity at all. Now I'm just picturing the Godhead as Monty Python's three-headed knight arguing with itself. The truth is that the idea that something is both 3 things and one thing at the same time is, what's the word? Stupid?
Stupid works.
Silly?
Yeah.
Logically impossible? Whatever it is, no amount of botanical metaphor is going to help. It's just sort of a Fox News-esque platitude meant to be just enough that simple people can accept it, but not enough to stand up to any kind of deeper inquiry.
Well, you know that there's that one where they say, think of the Godhead like water. It can be vapor. It can be ice. It can be liquid. That one at least requires you to think for a second, right? This one, like, hey, it's 3 leaves on one leaf. Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, that's not doing it for me, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, even that one, it's like, okay, but it can't be those same things, those 3 different things at the same time.
Right.
Like, you still can't be 3 things and one thing.
But it's like you can't be 3 leaves in one leaf unless you're just one leaf with 3 branches. I don't know. Fuck it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It breaks down pretty quickly upon inquiry. Anyway, look, none of that matters because there's no evidence that Patrick ever said it. That concept popped up centuries later, but Since shamrocks are super Irish, people just started associating it with their boy. Here's a fun bit of trivia. Patrick lived in the 400s CE, but the Catholic Church didn't officially start canonizing saints until the late 900s. Before that, the concept of a saint was just a folksy notion. If someone was considered important to the local believers, he or she was their, scare quotes, saint. A saint by tradition and not by any sort of papal dispensation. It was literally just a popularity contest. Technically, the Catholic Church considers everyone in heaven a saint, but officially canonized ones, as we know, are extra special. So, to conclude, St. Patrick was never canonized a saint, wasn't Irish, didn't convert Ireland to Christianity, never drove out any snakes, said nothing about the Shamrock, and likely wasn't even named Patrick. His color is blue, his feast day is during Lent, and the holiday everybody in the U.S. celebrates that bears his name is 100% a secular shit show that has nothing whatsoever to do with the guy it's named for, and everything to do with how much Americans love an excuse to binge drink and act silly. So, with that, I'll leave you with some very special St. Patrick's Day sayings that I found on a website called greetingcardpoet.com. Try saying one to a friend or loved one today. I'm sorry, I had to do these because it was literally, I was looking for something to say at the top of the thing and found this site, and it was just, anyway, you'll get it. The first one's pretty good. Here we go. Wishing you a pot of gold and all the joy your heart can hold. So, rhymey.
Nice.
It's got that pot of gold thing feels, Irishy or whatever. Don't worry, they get way worse. This one. Don't worry, be Irish. Greetings from this Irishman. Okay. For today, every green beer that you say no to, a little baby leprechaun dies. Happy St. Pat's.
Oh my God. All right.
Happy St. Patty's. I'll drink a green beer for that.
Okay.
I'm just gonna keep going with these because I get a kick out of them.
Did
I don't care
Dr.
if you guys
Steve
are
Brule write these?
right. Yeah, I think so.
You dingus.
You ready? You ready, you turkey? Hope you have a very green St. Patty's with lots of lucky green wishes that all come true. It's a little clunky, that one.
Yeah.
This one's a little bit better, though not making any sense. If you were green, I'd still love you. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Okay.
And then
It's trying to be inclusive. I like that.
Sure.
Yeah. I like it. Then they got a little bit more sort of wistful in nature, I would say. The old pipe gives the sweetest smoke. I don't know if that's actually an Irish thing or what. This one I find utterly baffling. Your son is your son today, but your daughter is your daughter forever.
What?
St. Patrick's Day. I don't know that one either. 3 diseases without shame: love, itch, and thirst.
Love what?
Itch, like when you get itchy, you get a little itch.
All right.
We got 2 more. I'm just gonna go for 2 more.
Okay.
Yeah, believe me, I narrowed this field down dramatically. So just be glad I'm not reading all of the things. Here we go. This one's a really good one. I like this one a lot. 1 Guinness, 2 Guinness, 10 Guinness.
Okay.
That's the whole thing.
For a person with
like
almost no familiarity with the English language at all, they do a pretty good job of writing these.
Yeah, not too bad. And then this one, pinch me. I can't believe I'm lucky enough to be celebrating St. Patrick's Day with you. So there you go. The sentiments of a poet for
Yeah.
St. Patrick's Day.
Well, I'm glad you found that one because Ireland, it definitely doesn't have any famous poets of note.
Yeah, no poetry has ever come out of Ireland, so
it's
we
a-
had to
it's
go
an-
with the internet.
It's a poetryless island, that's for sure. So
I think St. Patrick drove the
he drove
poets
the poets out, but he left the lyricists.
Yeah.
So he was never actually canonized by the church?
Nope.
Huh.
That's
They-
hilarious.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay. Good
Happy
to know.
not Saint, not Patrick's Day.
Go out and
everybody.
do all the things that have nothing to do with anything with
Go
him.
dye something green. Apparently, the Irish, like, even the corned beef and cabbage thing that we all do here in the States, Irish weren't really into corned beef. Like, what's funny is the story is somehow the corned beef was invented in England, and then the Irish got really good at making it, but then it would ship back to England because they couldn't afford it in Ireland.
They just take it, yeah.
So when the Irish came to the U.S. and corned beef wasn't expensive, then they embraced it, and it became like a big deal here in the U.S. among American Irish people, Irish Americans. But yeah, now it's apparently a little more popular in Ireland, but it wasn't. All the things that we think of as like how to celebrate Ireland during St. Patrick's Day are just us. That's just us stuff.
You're welcome, Ireland. Here's
Hey, there
here's
you
how to
go.
feel about your ancient characters. So
Well, everybody go out there, but don't stay home. We got to do one more St. Patrick's Day inside, and then next year we can catch all the diseases that aren't coronavirus.
That's right. That's right.
all right, well, happy St. Patrick's, everyone.